Welcome back to Investing Talk Podcast. When a company starts, popping up in headlines in your social media feeds, it's time to take a closer look.
Right.
And that's why today we're looking at HIMS and HERS Health.
Oh, okay.
Ticker symbol HIMS.
Interesting.
It's generating buzz, but is it justified? We're going to unpack their recent performance, see if their financials back up the excitement, and explore what's driving all this investor interest.
Yeah, that's a really good approach, I think. It's early January 2025, and the market's in this cautious, almost hesitant growth phase after a rocky December. Investors are kind of eyeing mid-cap stocks like HIMS and HERS, just searching for potential in a somewhat unpredictable landscape.
Yeah, and speaking of unpredictable, HIMS and HERS stock is up over 6% today, January 2nd.
Wow.
Sounds like a New Year's rally, right?
Hmm.
But here's the catch. It's still down about 31% from its 52-week high back in November.
Oh.
So what's the story here? Is this a buying opportunity or a sign of trouble ahead?
Well, I don't think the volatility itself is necessarily a red flag.
Okay.
Yeah.
Remember, HIMS and HERS operates in a very dynamic, fast-growing market.
Right.
It has a high beta value, meaning it tends to swing more dramatically than the overall market, both up and down.
Yeah.
So this can be exciting for some investors, but it definitely requires a higher risk tolerance.
Okay, that makes sense. It's like riding a roller coaster.
Yeah.
Filling for some, nausea-inducing for others.
Exactly.
But let's move beyond the stock price for a minute and dig into their recent Q3 2024 earnings report. Because here's where it gets interesting. They reported a whopping 77% year-over-year revenue increase.
Wow.
Jumping from $226.7 million to $401.6 million.
Huge.
They even surpassed analyst expectations.
Oh, wow.
Now, those are numbers that make you sit up and take notice. What's driving this impressive growth?
Well, the revenue jump is largely fueled by their subscriber growth. They saw a 44% increase, reaching approximately 2 million users.
Wow.
This subscriber base is the engine of their business model, and its rapid expansion is a key indicator of their current success. So more subscribers translate into more revenue, but are they just burning cash to acquire these users, or is there actual profitability?
That's the critical question, and the answer is they are turning a profit.
Okay.
Q3 2024 saw a net income of $75.6 million, a dramatic turnaround from the $7.6 million loss in the same quarter of the previous year.
Wow, that's a significant swing from red to black in just 1 year. What's behind this financial turnaround?
Yeah, it's important to look at the details here. A significant portion of that profit stems from a one-time tax benefit.
Okay.
So while it's undoubtedly positive, we need to be cautious about extrapolating this level of profit into future projections.
All right, so a healthy dose of skepticism is warranted when looking at those profit figures. But they also raised their full-year revenue guidance to a range of $1.46 billion to $1.465 billion.
Okay.
Isn't that a sign of confidence for the future, or are they just setting themselves up for a fall?
Raising guidance is typically a bullish signal. It shows that HIMS and HERS believes in its growth trajectory.
Right.
And that confidence can influence investors. However, it's crucial to assess whether this optimism is justified given the competitive landscape and potential challenges ahead.
Speaking of potential challenges and opportunities, there's some intriguing industry news that could shake things up for HIMS and HERS.
Okay.
The anticipated launch of a generic version of Novo Nordisk's liraglutide. It's a GLP-1 diabetes drug, also used for weight loss.
I've heard of that.
It's generating a lot of buzz.
Wow.
How does this development tie into HIMS and HERS strategy, and why should our listeners care?
This generic launch could be a game changer.
Oh, really?
Generic medications are significantly more affordable, making liraglutide accessible to a much wider customer base seeking weight loss solutions.
Interesting.
And HIMS and HERS, with their telehealth platform, is perfectly positioned to connect with those customers.
So they could ride this wave of increased demand and expand their market reach even further. That sounds like a recipe for continued growth, wouldn't you say?
It certainly has that potential, but like with any investment opportunity, there are risks to consider. The telehealth market is becoming increasingly competitive.
Yeah.
With numerous players vying for market share.
Yeah.
So HIMS and HERS needs to stay ahead of the curve,
Right.
both in terms of innovation and customer acquisition.
That's a great point. So it's not just about riding the wave, it's about navigating it strategically.
Exactly.
They've got those 2 million subscribers.
Yeah.
How do they hold on to them when competitors are, nipping at their heels?
Yeah.
What's their game plan?
Retention is key in any subscription-based business model.
Right.
So HIMS and HERS needs to focus on providing value, convenience, and a seamless customer experience.
Okay.
Think personalized services, expanded product offerings, and a robust telehealth platform
Yeah.
that caters to evolving customer needs.
All right, so innovation and customer satisfaction are crucial.
Absolutely.
But let's talk about the elephant in the room, their current valuation.
Okay.
We touched on that high PE ratio. It's sitting around 65.07,
Yeah, that's high.
significantly higher than the industry average. For our listeners who may not be familiar with this metric,
Right.
could you break down what this means and why it matters?
Of course. So the price to earnings ratio, or PE ratio, is essentially a measure of how much investors are willing to pay
Yep.
for each dollar of a company's earnings.
Right.
A high PE ratio like HIMS and HERS currently has suggests that investors are highly optimistic
Okay.
about the company's future growth prospects.
Interesting.
They're essentially betting that those earnings will continue to climb.
So a high PE ratio isn't necessarily a bad thing.
Not inherently, but it does indicate higher expectations.
Yeah.
Investors are already pricing in significant growth.
Right.
If the company doesn't deliver on those expectations, the stock price could take a hit.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
It's like buying a hot new tech gadget.
Yeah.
You're paying a premium for the perceived future value.
Exactly.
But if it turns out to be a dud,
Right.
you're left feeling disappointed and your wallet feels lighter.
Yeah. It's all about balancing the potential rewards with the inherent risks. And speaking of risks, there are a few specific to HIMS and HERS that I think investors should be aware of.
Let's dive into those.
Yeah.
What are some of the red flags that our listeners should have on their radar?
One key risk is their dependence on a relatively small number of products.
Okay.
Sexual health and hair loss treatments currently generate a substantial portion of their revenue.
Right.
If demand in these areas were to slow down, it could significantly impact their overall performance.
So diversification is key.
Right.
It sounds like they're making moves in that direction by exploring weight loss medications.
Exactly.
But they need to ensure those new product lines gain traction.
They do. Another factor to consider is the regulatory landscape.
Okay.
Telehealth is a relatively new
Right.
and rapidly evolving field, with regulations varying from state to state. Any changes in those regulations could impact HIMS and HERS business model.
So it's not just about internal factors. They're also subject to external forces they can't fully control.
That's right.
What about their financial health beyond the impressive PE ratio? What should investors be looking at?
It's always wise to examine a company's debt levels.
Oh.
HIMS and HERS does carry some debt,
Right.
but it appears manageable at this point.
Yeah.
However, investors should keep an eye on how that debt grows relative to their earnings.
So debt can be a useful tool for expansion,
Yeah.
but it can also become a burden if not managed carefully.
Right.
Any other financial metrics that our listeners should pay attention to?
Cash flow is crucial.
Okay.
It provides insight into a company's ability to generate cash from its core operations.
Right.
HIMS and HERS has demonstrated positive cash flow,
Okay.
which is a reassuring sign.
Yeah.
It suggests they're managing their operations effectively and have the financial flexibility to invest in future growth.
That's definitely a positive.
Yeah.
Okay, we've covered a lot of ground here, the good, the bad, and the potentially game-changing.
We have.
But for our listeners who are considering investing in HIMS and HERS, what's the bottom line? What should they take away from this discussion?
I think the key takeaway is balance.
Yeah.
You know, HIMS and HERS is operating in a dynamic and rapidly growing market.
Right.
They've demonstrated impressive revenue growth, a willingness to innovate, and a smart approach to product expansion. However, their high valuation reliance on a few key products and the evolving regulatory landscape suggests that a cautious approach is warranted.
So it's not a slam dunk investment.
No.
It requires careful consideration, thorough research, and an understanding of both the potential upsides
Yes.
and the potential downsides.
Precisely. Investors need to assess their own financial goals, risk tolerance, and investment timeline
Right.
to determine if HIMS and HERS aligns with their overall strategy.
Great advice. Well, we've certainly given our listeners a lot to think about.
I hope so.
But before we wrap up this episode of Investing Talk podcast, any final thoughts for those who are intrigued by HIMS and HERS but still on the fence? It's been a roller coaster of a discussion, hasn't it? Highs and lows, potential and risks. HIMS and HERS Health, ticker symbol HIMS, definitely keeps things interesting. Before we sign off, any final insights to help our listeners make sense of it all?
Yeah, I think the key takeaway here is that investing is a long game.
Okay.
While those short-term stock movements can be exciting, the real focus should be on a company's long-term potential.
Right.
With HIMS and HERS, they're tapping into a really powerful trend,
Yeah.
disrupting that traditional healthcare model,
Uh-huh.
making it more accessible, more convenient for millions of people.
Yeah.
That kind of disruption can fuel significant growth for years to come.
So zoom out, look beyond the daily fluctuations,
Yeah.
and focus on the bigger picture. It's like those optical illusion pictures. Sometimes you have to step back to see what's really there.
Precisely. And the market seems to be seeing the potential too, right? That premium valuation we discussed, that's a strong indicator of investor confidence.
Right.
But remember, confidence alone doesn't guarantee success.
Right.
As we've discussed, there are risks to consider.
Definitely. It's a balancing act, weighing that optimism against the potential challenges.
Exactly.
Thorough research is key, and we encourage our listeners to dive deeper into those financials,
Yes.
that competitive landscape,
Yes.
any regulatory hurdles that might pop up.
Absolutely. The more informed you are, the better equipped you'll be to make decisions
Right.
that align with your personal investment goals.
Right. So let's recap for our listeners.
Okay.
HIMS and HERS Health, strong revenue growth, innovative approach, positioned in a dynamic market with a lot of runway. Those are the highlights.
But on the flip side,
Yeah.
they're trading at a premium,
Right.
relying on a few key products and navigating a rapidly evolving regulatory landscape. These are the factors that warrant a bit of caution.
It's a classic risk-reward scenario.
It is.
And ultimately, the decision to invest or not rests with each individual listener.
Absolutely. Do your due diligence, consider your risk tolerance.
Right.
And assess if HIMS and HERS fits into your long-term investment strategy.
Great advice to end on. We've covered a lot of ground today on Investing Talk Podcast, exploring the ins and outs of HIMS and HERS Health.
We have.
If you found this episode insightful, don't forget to subscribe to Investing Talk Podcast for more in-depth analysis of companies making waves in the market.
And tell your friends. Share this episode with your fellow investors and let us know your thoughts on HIMS and HERS in the comments.
Right.
We'd love to hear your perspectives.
Until next time, happy investing.